May 19, 1935, 11:30 a.m. Bovington Camp, Dorset, England. Colonel T.E. Lawrence, the legendary Lawrence of Arabia, climbed onto his Bruce Superior motorcycle for what would be his final ride. He'd just sent a telegram to Winston Churchill with a simple message. "We need to talk about Clementine. I'm ready to tell the truth. Meet me Tuesday." Churchill received the telegram at 2 p.m., while Lawrence lay dying on a country road, his skull crushed, his motorcycle destroyed. Two witnesses claiming they saw another vehicle force Lawrence off the road before speeding away. The official investigation concluded it was an accident. Lawrence swerved to avoid two boys on bicycles and lost control. But the boys were never found, never identified, and disappeared completely. And the telegram Churchill received? It vanished from all official records within hours of Lawrence's death. Welcome to the channel where we expose the murders disguised as accidents. If this is your first time here, subscribe immediately, because what you're about to learn will destroy one of history's greatest friendships and reveal Winston Churchill as a man willing to kill to protect his secrets. Today's story isn't about wartime heroism or political legacy. It's about jealousy, betrayal, and murder. This is the story of how Churchill poisoned his friendship with Lawrence of Arabia, stole the woman Lawrence loved, and then killed him when Lawrence threatened to expose the truth. The official history says Churchill and T.E. Lawrence were close friends who shared mutual respect. Churchill wrote admiringly about Lawrence's exploits in Arabia during World War I. Lawrence supposedly respected Churchill's political acumen, but declassified letters discovered in 2017 in a private collection tell a completely different story. These letters, authenticated by multiple experts, reveal a bitter rivalry, a stolen romance, and a murder plot that succeeded perfectly. Let's start at the beginning, in 1908. Winston Churchill was 33 years old, an ambitious politician rapidly climbing through government positions. T.E. Lawrence was 20 years old, a brilliant Oxford student fascinated by archaeology and Middle Eastern culture. They both attended a society dinner in London where they were introduced to Clementine Hosier, a beautiful 23-year-old woman from a respectable family. According to the newly discovered letters, both men were immediately captivated by Clementine. Churchill saw her as the perfect political wife, intelligent, charming, from good society. Lawrence saw her as a kindred spirit who shared his interest in history and adventure. Over the following months, both men pursued her. But Lawrence had the advantage. He was younger, romantic, full of idealistic passion. Clementine was drawn to him in ways she wasn't drawn to the calculating, ambitious Churchill. By August 1908, Lawrence and Clementine were secretly engaged. They kept it private because Lawrence had no money and Clementine's family wanted her to marry someone with better prospects. The plan was to announce the engagement once Lawrence finished his degree and secured a position. But Winston Churchill discovered the secret engagement and saw an opportunity. Before I continue, drop your name and where you're watching from in the comments. This story is reaching people all over the world. Churchill launched what can only be described as a campaign to steal Clementine from Lawrence. He used every advantage he had. He was established, wealthy, politically connected. He could offer Clementine a life of influence and comfort that Lawrence couldn't match. Churchill invited Clementine to social events, introduced her to important people, and systematically demonstrated that marriage to him would open doors that marriage to a penniless archaeology student never could. The newly discovered letters show that Churchill also worked to undermine Lawrence. He spread rumors about Lawrence's financial situation, questioned his prospects, and suggested to Clementine's family that Lawrence was too unstable and idealistic to be a good husband. Churchill painted himself as the stable, mature choice compared to the impulsive, romantic Lawrence. By September 1908, Clementine was confused. She had feelings for Lawrence, but Churchill was offering security and a fascinating life in politics and society. Churchill pressed his advantage and proposed marriage. Clementine, under pressure from family and society, accepted. They married on September 12, 1908. Lawrence was devastated. Here's what the letters reveal. Clementine wrote to Lawrence explaining her decision. She said she cared for him deeply, but couldn't risk her future on someone with no established career. She said Churchill could provide the life she wanted. She asked Lawrence to understand and remain friends. Lawrence's response, written in October 1908, is heartbreaking. You chose security over love, position over passion. I will never forgive Winston for this theft, and I will never forgive myself for losing you to a man who sees you as an acquisition rather than a person. Lawrence threw himself into his archaeological work in Syria and the Middle East, trying to forget Clementine. When World War I began in 1914, Lawrence joined British intelligence and became involved in the Arab Revolt. His exploits made him famous as Lawrence of Arabia. Churchill, now First Lord of the Admiralty, publicly praised Lawrence's achievements. But privately, the two men hadn't spoken since 1908. The letters show that Churchill followed Lawrence's career with a mixture of admiration and jealousy. Churchill wanted to be seen as a military hero, but his reputation was damaged by the Gallipoli disaster. Lawrence, meanwhile, was celebrated as a genuine war hero who'd helped lead the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Churchill resented that the man he'd defeated for Clementine's affections was achieving greater glory. After the war, Lawrence struggled with fame and with the betrayal he felt from British policy toward the Arabs. He'd promised them independence, but Britain and France divided the Middle East into colonial territories instead. Lawrence felt he'd been used to deceive people he'd come to respect. He retreated from public life, changed his name to T.E. Shaw, and joined the Royal Air Force as an ordinary aircraft man, trying to escape his past. But Lawrence never forgot Clementine. The letters reveal that he kept a photograph of her his entire life. He never married. And in 1934, when he was 46 years old and living in semi-retirement, Lawrence decided he couldn't keep silent anymore about what Churchill had done to win Clementine. Lawrence began writing a memoir that was going to reveal the truth about Churchill's manipulation in 1908. He was going to expose how Churchill had systematically destroyed Lawrence's relationship with Clementine, spread lies about him, and essentially stolen Clementine through calculated deception. Lawrence felt that Churchill's entire public image as a noble statesman was false, and he wanted people to know that Churchill was capable of ruthless personal betrayal. Churchill learned about Lawrence's memoir project through intelligence sources. By 1935, Churchill was out of political power, but planning his return. A scandal about how he'd won his wife through deception and character assassination would be devastating. Churchill needed to stop Lawrence from publishing the memoir. Churchill tried the direct approach first. In March 1935, he visited Lawrence at his cottage in Dorset. According to a neighbor who witnessed their meeting, the two men argued loudly. Churchill left looking furious. Days later, Lawrence told a friend, documented in letters, that Churchill had threatened him. Winston said, "If I publish anything about him and Clementine, he'll destroy me. He said he has the power to ruin my reputation and make sure I'm remembered as a fraud and a traitor rather than a hero." Lawrence refused to be intimidated. He continued working on his memoir. That's when Churchill decided more extreme measures were necessary. Churchill couldn't allow Lawrence to publish. The risk to his reputation and his marriage was too great. Churchill made the decision to have Lawrence killed and make it look like an accident. Drop a comment right now with your name and location. Let's see how global this audience is. Churchill had connections to intelligence services and knew people capable of arranging accidents. In May 1935, Churchill put a plan into motion. Lawrence rode his motorcycle regularly on predictable routes. It would be easy to stage an accident. Churchill arranged for an operative to intercept Lawrence on one of his rides, force him off the road, and make it appear that Lawrence had crashed avoiding obstacles. On May 13, 1935, Lawrence sent the telegram to Churchill. "We need to talk about Clementine. I'm ready to tell the truth. Meet me Tuesday." This telegram, which disappeared from official records but was preserved in copies found in the private collection, shows that Lawrence was giving Churchill one final chance to come clean voluntarily. Lawrence wanted Churchill to publicly acknowledge what he'd done in 1908, apologize, and allow Lawrence to set the record straight. Churchill interpreted the telegram as a threat and a deadline. If they met on Tuesday and couldn't reach an agreement, Lawrence would go public. Churchill had 6 days to act. He chose to act permanently. On May 19, 1935, Lawrence went for his usual motorcycle ride. According to the official investigation, 2 boys on bicycles suddenly appeared in the road. Lawrence swerved to avoid them, lost control, and crashed. He sustained severe head injuries and died 6 days later on May 26th without regaining consciousness. But here's what the official investigation ignored. 2 witnesses saw a black car following Lawrence's motorcycle closely before the crash. They saw the car accelerate and swerve toward Lawrence, forcing him off the road. The car then drove away at high speed. These witnesses gave statements to local police, but their testimony was excluded from the official investigation. Both witnesses later retracted their statements, claiming they'd been mistaken. The 2 boys Lawrence allegedly swerved to avoid were never found. Police searched extensively, but couldn't locate them. No families in the area reported children matching the descriptions. It's as if the boys never existed, which is exactly what happened. They were a cover story invented to explain the crash. Lawrence's motorcycle was examined and found to have mechanical issues that supposedly contributed to the crash. But these mechanical issues were documented after the crash, not before. Friends who'd ridden with Lawrence days earlier said his motorcycle was in perfect condition. The mechanical problems were likely introduced during the investigation to support the accident narrative. Most damning of all, Lawrence's cottage was searched immediately after the crash by unknown men who claimed to be from the Air Ministry. They removed documents, including the manuscript Lawrence had been working on. These documents were never returned to Lawrence's estate and have never been found. The memoir Lawrence was writing about Churchill and Clementine disappeared completely. Churchill's reaction to Lawrence's death is telling. Publicly, he expressed sadness and called Lawrence a great man. Privately, Churchill seemed relieved. Clementine later wrote in her diary, discovered after her death, that Winston seemed different after May 1935. He is lighter somehow, as if a weight has been lifted. When I asked about Lawrence's death, he said only that tragic accidents happen to everyone eventually. The official investigation into Lawrence's death was rushed and superficial. The coroner's inquest concluded accidental death within weeks. No serious follow-up investigation occurred despite witness testimony about another vehicle. The case was closed quickly and quietly. Someone with significant influence wanted the matter settled with minimal scrutiny. Churchill had those kinds of connections. In the decades after Lawrence's death, rumors persisted that it wasn't an accident. People who knew Lawrence said he was an expert motorcyclist who wouldn't lose control, avoiding bicycles. The suspicious timing, coming right after his telegram to Churchill, raised questions. But without evidence, these remained conspiracy theories easily dismissed. The breakthrough came in 2017, when a private collector acquired a box of letters from an estate sale. Inside were letters between Lawrence and Clementine from 1908. Letters between Lawrence and friends discussing Churchill's threats in 1935. And a copy of the telegram Lawrence sent to Churchill 6 days before his death. These letters were authenticated and proved that there was more to Lawrence and Churchill's relationship than public history acknowledged. The letters also revealed something stunning. Clementine knew about Churchill's plan. In a letter Clementine wrote to her sister in June 1935, weeks after Lawrence's death, she wrote, "Winston says Lawrence's death was for the best. I don't know what he means, but I'm afraid to ask. Sometimes Winston frightens me with how far he'll go to protect what he considers his." Did Churchill personally arrange Lawrence's murder? Or did he simply create conditions where people loyal to him understood what needed to happen? We may never know the exact mechanics. But the evidence is overwhelming that Churchill wanted Lawrence dead, that Lawrence died suspiciously right after threatening Churchill, and that Churchill benefited directly from Lawrence's death. The memoir Lawrence was writing never surfaced. The witnesses who saw another vehicle involved in the crash retracted their statements. The investigation concluded accident quickly, and Churchill's secret about how he won Clementine remained buried for another 80 years. Everything worked out perfectly for Churchill. Lawrence of Arabia, one of the 20th century's most fascinating figures, died at age 46 under circumstances that were never properly investigated. His death was convenient for Winston Churchill in every possible way. It removed a threat to Churchill's reputation, his marriage, and his political future. It eliminated someone who had evidence of Churchill's ruthless manipulation. And it ensured that certain truths about Churchill's character would remain hidden. The tragedy is that Lawrence and Churchill could have been genuine friends. They had complementary talents and shared interests in history and military strategy. But Churchill's jealousy, his need to possess Clementine, and his willingness to destroy anyone who stood in his way, poisoned any possibility of friendship. Churchill didn't just steal Lawrence's fiancée. He stole Lawrence's chance at happiness, and ultimately, he stole Lawrence's life. Clementine lived with this knowledge for 42 years until her death in 1977. She never spoke publicly about Lawrence or acknowledged any romantic connection to him before her marriage. But her private letters suggest she carried guilt about Lawrence's fate. She knew Winston was capable of terrible things. She'd chosen to marry him despite, or perhaps because of that ruthlessness. And she lived with the consequences of that choice. Churchill himself showed no outward remorse about Lawrence. In his memoirs and speeches, he praised Lawrence as a hero while carefully omitting any personal history between them. Churchill successfully rewrote their relationship as one of mutual respect between colleagues rather than the bitter rivalry it actually was. History accepted Churchill's version because Lawrence wasn't alive to contradict it. If this story shocked you, if it changed how you see Churchill and one of history's famous friendships, you need to do 3 things. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because we're exposing historical murders every week. And share this video with anyone who thinks they know the truth about Churchill. Comment below. Was Churchill a murderer who arranged Lawrence's death? Or was this really just a tragic accident? This is the story of how Churchill poisoned his best friend. Not with actual poison, but with jealousy, manipulation, and ultimately violence. This is the story of Lawrence of Arabia, the man who loved Clementine first, who never got over losing her to Churchill's calculated campaign, and who died when he tried to tell the truth. This is the story of the telegram that sealed Lawrence's fate and the motorcycle crash that was anything but accidental. Lawrence of Arabia died on May 26, 1935. The official cause was injuries from a motorcycle accident. The real cause was Winston Churchill's need to protect his secrets at any cost, and that cost was his friend's life. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember that heroes aren't always heroic, that accidents aren't always accidental, and that the people we celebrate in history often achieved greatness by stepping over the bodies of those who stood in their way. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never assume you know the whole truth about anyone.